अभी करना तुम्हें।
Badri, you can start.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. Today we are gathered here to talk about trans fats. What are trans fats? We all know that fats are essential for our health, and but do you know that some fats are good, while others are dangerous and can be even harmful? The type of fat that is dangerous is the synthetic trans fat or TFA, and the other type of fat is SFA, saturated fatty acids. Nowadays, earlier it was thought that the TFA is better than the SFA. However, now we know that the TFA is the main culprit behind all the cardiac diseases and obesity which we experience in our lives. Today, to talk with us, we have Professor Sandeep Mishra. From Cardiology at AIMS. He is also the former chairman of National Intervention Council and editor-in-chief of Indian Heart Journal. He is also in the board of trustees of SKY. We are happy to have you here, sir.
Thank you, Badri. Let me try to share my screen. Just hold on for a moment. So somebody has to enable my screen.
Mona?
Somebody has to enable the screen for sharing. They're still disabled.
Yeah, just give me a minute, sir.
Yes, yes.
So you may try now. I've enabled it.
Okay. Right. So can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
You are able to see?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what I was asked to do was to talk about this topic, ban trans fat, just do it. So let us see. So what we will try to do in this particular session is to talk about the diet and disease. What is the evidence connecting disease with diet? What is a balanced diet? And what are the diet recommendations by international authorities? Then we will talk about value of fat in nutrition. We will talk a bit about good fat versus bad fat. Also good cholesterol versus bad cholesterol. I will touch upon that. Then I will talk what is trans fat. Then how can trans fat consumption affect human health? There is trans fat found in diet. How to lower trans fat consumption in diet. And then if time permits, I will like to also talk about a little bit about other foods which can impact upon health. That is carbohydrates, fruits and vegetables, cereals, fiber, fish, and other sources of N3 PUFA. And I will indeed talk about PUFA so that you will know what I am talking about. But we will talk about all these things. And after that, I will like to be happy to take any questions that you might have had as a result of this presentation. So what is the relation between diet and disease? So we know that diet can be contributor to number of diseases, and I think Badri told you a bit about it. They can contribute to actually something called lifestyle diseases. And so what is lifestyle diseases? So there are diseases which are like tuberculosis, malaria, where one organism is responsible for the disease. So for tuberculosis, it is Mycobacterium tuberculosis that is responsible. For malaria, it could be Plasmodium vivax or some other organism. I'm sure some of the senior people who are there might know of these causative organisms that cause particular diseases. But there are certain lifestyle diseases which don't have a single organism causing them, but have a host of risk factors. And those risk factors are lifestyle factors. So what are the lifestyle risk factors for diseases? So they can be like blood pressure, there could be diabetes, there could be some other factors like diet, it could be increased stress, it could be lack of exercise. So so diet and exercise, they are lifestyle issues. That's why we call these diseases like heart disease, cerebrovascular disease like stroke or cancer or diabetes also lifestyle diseases, because they don't have one causative organism, but they have got a group of risk factors, including diet, that can cause these kind of diseases. But how does diet cause these lifestyle diseases? There are many intermediary biological mechanisms which come into play, and these intermediary mechanisms could include the levels of cholesterol. I have to tell you that there are three types of cholesterols. When we talk of cholesterol, we talk of one general term as cholesterol, but cholesterol is not one. There are basically three different types of cholesterols. The bad cholesterol is called LDL, low density lipoprotein. This is the LDL. That's why many of times you must be hearing that LDL is high, etc. So there are two bad cholesterols, LDL, which is very bad, and there is something called VLDL, which is also bad. But then there could be some good cholesterol also. And the good cholesterol is HDL, high density lipoprotein cholesterol. This is called good cholesterol. Bad cholesterol causes heart disease. Good cholesterol actually prevents heart disease. So I think this concept is important to understand, that cholesterol by itself alone is not enough. It is whether the bad cholesterol is raised, that can cause heart disease. And if good cholesterol is sometimes raised, which can actually prevent heart diseases. Now, other than cholesterol, there is also something called triglyceride. There are other factors involved like blood pressure, thrombotic tendencies, and so many other factors, endothelial functions, which can all interplay among each other and cause these lifestyle diseases, which in this particular case are heart disease, cerebrovascular disease means stroke or LACVA, and cancer. So these are the things that are commonly caused by inappropriate or unbalanced diet. So now you would say, okay, you say that these factors cause diseases, but what is the evidence? How can you be so sure that if you eat a junk food diet, you can have disease, but if you eat a balanced diet, you can actually reduce death rate and prevent heart diseases and also prevent cancer? So this is a large study which included about 25,000 adults, and they took a balanced diet, which was actually a Mediterranean diet, which has high consumption of vegetables, dals, that is legumes, fruits and vegetables, cereal, fish, and low consumption of the red meat and dairy. And what they found was that if you took a balanced diet, there was 25% reduction in death, even in healthy people. So this is interesting. These people are otherwise healthy. They don't have any disease. But if they take a healthy diet, still they would reduce their death rate by 25% or reduce by 1/4. And disease by heart disease will become 1/3, reduced by 1/3. And death from cancer would also reduce by 1/4. So interestingly, even in normal people, if they consume a balanced diet, they would get these kind of benefits from just plain diet. And therefore, diet is a very important component, not only in preventing heart diseases, but even in preventing death. So the next question, of course, is what is a balanced diet? You would ask me, what is a balanced diet? So I will tell you that a balanced diet is one where saturated fat is less than 7% of total calories consumed. The total fat is at most 1/3 of the total calorie consumption. So it should not be very high. Carbohydrate is up to 60%, between 50 to 60%. It has good amount of fiber, good amount of protein, and cholesterol, total cholesterol consumption should be less than 200 milligram. So this is a very standard thing, and I don't know, but I think you should get exposed to these kind of figures right from the beginning, because they will play a very important role in your life. And if you stick to this recommendation, as I said, the death rate will decrease by 25%. And there is a good chance that you will add 10 years to your life. So if you are going to live, let us say 70 years, then if you have a balanced diet, you might live 80 years. So you could straight away improve your chance of survival by 10 years if you follow diet, exercise, and other lifestyle recommendations. So this is very important to know. But the one thing that is very important is that there is something called trans fatty acid. And I think all of you know a bit about it. But the trans fat should be less than 1% of the total caloric consumption, which is very important. And sodium intake is a bit debatable, because in warm countries where you sweat a lot, you could have a consumption as high as 5 grams per day. But usual consumption without sweating is less than 2.3 grams per day, or 1 teaspoonful of salt. So this is the usual consumption. So I hope I will spend some time on this. You will know which is what we call as a balanced diet. And actually, to make things simpler, what a number of people have done is made this choose my plate. And you can see that in this plate, the consumption of various things. So you can see more than 50% of consumption is fruits and vegetables, and then grains and protein. So basically, these are the important types of foods that you should be having in every meal. And dairy, as you see, is not a part of it. And it is actually a satellite, which means that you should not consume a lot of dairy products. Rather, you should focus on fruits, grains, vegetables, and proteins to have a balanced diet. So, some practical tips about diet given by American Heart Association. And these tips are particularly for reduction of heart diseases, but also for other lifestyle diseases and increasing your life expectancy also. So the number one recommendation is balanced calorie intake and physical activity to maintain a healthy body weight. So you should not be obese. Consume lots of fruits and vegetable. Consume whole grains, high fiber foods. So we know that the rice that we use now is a polished rice, where the kernel of the rice has been removed. So this is not good rice. Whereas in South India, if some of you have visited South India, or some of you are come from South India, you know there is something called brown rice, which has got which is not polished rice, and this is the better kind of rice. Likewise, from wheat, if you take maida, this is very polished grain, and this is not a good food to take. On the other hand, where a lot of husk is present, like you might have breads which are multi-grain breads, etc., which have got a lot of fibers. These are the better foods to consume. Then for non-veg, it is better to consume fish, especially oily fish, about twice a week. In case you are non-veg, then try to use fish rather than meat or other, red meat things. Try to consume fish, which is better. Then limit, I already told you, limit saturated fat to less than 7%, trans fat to less than 1%, and cholesterol to less than 300 milligram per day. By the way, cholesterol comes from, generally in diet, cholesterol comes from egg, especially the egg yellow. So basically, what it says is that per day you can consume 1 to 2 eggs safely, and it will be good. But beyond 2 eggs per day, you have to be a bit careful. Then, as I said, choose lean meat and vegetable alternatives. If you want to use dairy, then use fat-free skimmed milk with 1% fat and low-fat dairy products. Minimize intake of hydrogenated fats, which is the Vanaspati ghee, and I will come to that in a moment. Also, please understand that carbohydrate, especially sugar, is worse than fat. So people think fat is bad for heart health, and therefore they try to avoid fat. But sugar is even worse. And I will show you some data which shows that actually sugar, if you consume more than 60% of energy comes from sugar, it is actually worse than fat. So please be very careful and try to avoid a lot of sugar in your foods. added sugar, particularly sweetened beverages, can be very, very bad. And therefore, they should be avoided because they not only contain a lot of sugar, they contain a lot of acid also, and which cause lots of problem, and a lot of salt as well. So the seventh point, consume little or no salt, added salt, because foods contain some salt in themselves. And alcohol, I am sure you will not consume. So this is the thing. So basically, what the guidelines to tell you is that the green part is something that is recommended strongly. And the recommendation 1B says that any person who consumes reduced amount of saturated fat less than 7%, and total fat less than, and trans fat less than 1%, and cholesterol less than 200 milligram percent, protects his life and protects from developing heart disease. There is something about this omega-3 fatty acids also, I'll talk about that a bit later, which come from fish. So that's why, you know, having 2 servings of fish every week, at least for those who are non-vegetarian, is a good idea. Now, coming to the topic in question, that is fat in the diet. Now, we know that fats are terrific source of energy, but did you know that it is also important for cell structure, especially for cell membranes, which are the communicator or communicating organ of the cell with the rest of the environment. So fats are very, very important part of cell membrane and also part of communication mechanism of the cell. The other interesting fact is that human brain is 60% fat, and out of that 1/3 is essential fat, such as omega-3 fatty acid that I was talking to you about, which is present in cold fishes, which are found in cold seas, like salmon, for example, or some other examples are also there. Tuna fish, they are also very rich in essential fatty acids, omega-3 fatty acids. They are important, which are present, but they are present not only in the brain, but whole body. So they are very important constituents. Coming to these good fat versus bad fat. Now, to start, good fats derive mainly from plants and oily fish, as I already told you, because they contain omega-3 fatty acids. So the good fats come from plants and oily fish, but bad fats can be present in a lot of red meat and animal sources other than oily fish. So those sources can get bad fats. What good fats do is protect us from deadly diseases like heart attacks and strokes, and play a crucial role in brain function. As you see, they are part of the membrane, and also crucial role in those areas which help in communication of the body with the rest. For example, skin and hair, and so they help in regulating skin and hair growth as well. Now, technically speaking, the good fats are Mufa, which is monosaturated fatty acid, which is present in sunflower oil or wheat whole grain, or actually even more in mustard oil or olive oil or groundnut oil. So they are even more richer sources of Mufa, which is monosaturated fat. Mufa is polysaturated fat, which is found in especially the omega-3 variety. There are 2 varieties, N3 and N6. The omega-3 variety, which is the better variety or the good variety. So omega-3 variety is the good variety among the PUFA. There are 2 types of PUFA, omega-3 and omega-6. Omega-3 are good PUFAs, and they are present in sardines, walnuts, mackerel, and as I said, tuna fish and salmon. But omega-6 are present in plant sources like sunflower oil, sesame oil, and corn oil. But they are not very good. You can call them neutral fats. But omega-3 PUFAs are good fats. But what are bad fats? As I said, bad fats are mostly found in red meat and dairy foods and fried meals. That is why we tell you to avoid dairy products as well, because they contain a lot of bad fats. And they push up the cholesterol and increase the risk of heart attacks and strokes. And what are the bad fats? Generally, you know, saturated fatty acids are considered SFAs, are you can call them neutral or slightly bad, and good sources are eggs and red meat. Therefore, as I said, limit your egg consumption to about 2 per day, because more than that, you may start getting the bad effects of saturated fatty acid. Up to 2 eggs, there is no problem. It is actually good, because the yellow part of the egg also contains a lot of essential fatty acids. So not only saturated fatty acid, but they contain a lot of essential fatty acids which are required for proper function of brain. Therefore, for children, at least they should, if they are non-vegetarian, they can and they should consume about 2 eggs per day, because it helps in brain growth, and it also helps in other communication roles of the cell membrane. But the really worst kind of fat is the trans fat, which we are talking about. Trans fat is actually a kind of artificial fat, because it's not naturally present in animals. It comes as a result of reusing oil again and again, or in vanaspati ghee products. And I will talk to you about it, how these vanaspati ghee is produced. And anything that is cooked in vanaspati ghee, like dhaba food that you commonly find all around Delhi and even outside, or food on ready. For example, somebody is cooking a lot of, let us say, samosa or kachori or something like that. Even in biscuits and other bakery products, gujia, samosa, etc., all of them may be containing trans fat, because one, they could be made from vanaspati ghee products. Number two, they could be reusing oil again and again. So you know that if you go outside and you go to Reddy's and you see that somebody is cooking samosa, so they will have one kadai, they will put samosa and cook it, bring it out, put another lot in the same kadai, and so that oil will get reused again and again. And then as the oil gets reused again and again, it produces something that is called as trans fat. So that is why, and this fat is the worst kind of fat, and I will come to that. So what is a trans fat? Basically, we know that there, as I said, there are 3 types of fats. One is PUFA, which is polyunsaturated fats, which means that a lot of double bonds are present in the oil, which are present in the oil. So they are polyunsaturated fat. In monounsaturated fat, only one double bond is present. Now, what happens if you partly heat this oil? What will happen is, at high temperature, especially in the presence of metal catalyst like nickel and aluminum, the double bonds of this oil will get saturated or filled with hydrogen, and the oil will start hardening. Now, if it completely hardens, or if all the bonds are filled with hydrogen, then it becomes a saturated fat. But when not all bonds are saturated, but partially hydrogenated, then it becomes something which we call as vanaspati ghee. And this vanaspati ghee is very useful. Why? Why does industry? Basically, you know, what happens is that the industry has taken up this vanaspati ghee in a big way, and you convert a lot of oil into vanaspati ghee. Why? Because number one, this oil has a long shelf life. Normally, you would see that if you take any oil and store it for some time, if you take mustard oil, or if you take, let us say, soybean oil, and if you keep it for some time, the bad smell will start coming from that oil, and the oil will become rancid. But if you convert the oil into vanaspati ghee, it has got a very long half-life. It can even go beyond 2 years. So therefore, none of the oil is wasted, and therefore industry likes to use trans fat, because they can buy in bulk and then keep using it over a period of maybe a year, 2 years, and so on. Number two, what they do is, in preparation of vanaspati ghee, they will not use expensive oils like olive oil or even soya bean oil or safflower oil. What they will do is use the cheapest oil, and that is available as which is palm oil, which generally comes from Malaysia and Indonesia. And to make vanaspati ghee, they would use this cheaper oil. So the cost of vanaspati ghee will be less than regular oils actually. And therefore, the industry prefers using vanaspati ghee. The third thing is that people who are used to taste of ghee, and because this is also a thicker consistency, people think that it might be ghee, and because it tastes like ghee as well. So instead of ghee, they substitute Vanaspati ghee, which may be less than half the cost of real ghee, even less, 1/3, 1/4 of the cost of the ghee. And therefore, industry uses this fake ghee to claim that things are cooked in ghee. And lastly, this Vanaspati ghee, as I said, is thicker consistency and got a high melting point. It looks creamy and smooth and can be reused again and again, because already hydrogen bonds are filled, so there is no problem. And so people keep reusing, and that's why all the bakery industry, all the dhabas, all the ready, they've used this kind of oil because of because it is very easy to work with. And unfortunately, what they are doing is, while they are using something cheaper, something user friendly, but they are damaging health of people who consume these kind of fats. Now, interestingly, if you look at history of trans fat, as Badri also told us, initially it was thought that trans fat is better than saturated fat or butter. And what happened was, after Second World War, the process was discovered of making hydrogenated, cheaper source of vegetable oil, and West used it to prepare margarine, which some of you might be using. And so this is basically vegetable oil, which has been hydrogenated to form something like ghee, something which they call margarine, and they use it for a lot of bakery and other uses. By 1960s and 70s, it was thought of as a healthier alternative to saturated fat, and it was supposed to be better than butter. But the bad news came in following 1990, where it was found that trans fat was actually much worse than even the worst kind of naturally occurring fat, that is saturated fat, that is butter and ghee. So it is even worse, much worse than butter and ghee. But why is that? And the reason is that when you use trans fat, it not only increases bad cholesterol. I told you there are two types of cholesterol: good cholesterol, bad cholesterol. So what this trans fatty acid or Vanaspati ghee does is that it increases the bad fat, but on the other hand, it also decreases the good fat. So it is like, double whammy, where bad fats, bad cholesterol is increased and good cholesterol is increased. And therefore, once you start consuming this, we start seeing this high risk of developing heart disease. As a matter of fact, I don't know, you might have known that this heart disease came in India only in a big way after independence. And why did that happen? This was at this time, by 1960s, the hydrogenated fats were started produced in India also. And a lot of Vanaspati ghee, which that time it was called dalda ghee, was produced. And then people who were consuming ghee actually shifted over to dalda ghee. And people who were also using oil also shifted over to dalda ghee. And once they started using this Vanaspati ghee, suddenly there was epidemic of heart disease in India. Before, let us say, independence, heart disease was practically unknown in India. And the sole contributor to heart disease after emergency, or at least the major contributor, because there could be some other contributors as well. Changing lifestyle was also important, decreased exercise and using other kind of food products was also important. But the main thing was that people suddenly jumped over to Vanaspati ghee. And once they jumped over to Vanaspati ghee, they started having heart attacks and a lot of heart diseases. And then it was realized that Vanaspati ghee or trans fat could be worse. So let us now see what other kinds of fats do to the cholesterol levels. If you look at Mufa, which is monounsaturated fatty acid, it is the best fat. Why? Because it not only increases the good cholesterol, but it also decreases the bad cholesterol. So this is what we want. This is exactly opposite of trans fat. Mufa increases good cholesterol and decreases bad cholesterol. If you look at Pufa, which is present in, we know, safflower or safflower oil, this decreases LDL, that is bad cholesterol, but unfortunately it also decreases a bit the good cholesterol. So it decreases the HDL also, but it also decreases LDL. So the overall effect could be neutral. On the other hand, the saturated fat, why we consider it not very good? Because although it increases the good cholesterol a bit, HDL, but it also increases the bad cholesterol in a big way. So LDL cholesterol, that is the bad cholesterol, increases very much, although HDL, the good cholesterol also increases a bit. But the worst fat, as I already discussed with you, is trans fat, because it not only increases the bad cholesterol, but also decreases the good cholesterol. So there is nothing good about trans fat. It is bad, bad, bad all the way. And there are some other reasons as well, besides the LDL and HDL. As I said, told you, there's another kind of fat called triglycerides, which is a little bit bad, not as bad as LDL, but little bit bad. And trans fat also increase triglyceride. Not only fat metabolism. What trans fat can do is they can promote inflammation. You might know we have seen this problem of COVID, and the problem of COVID was not virus. It was inflammation caused by virus. And that created havoc, and it created lung disease and heart disease and so on and so forth. It was not virus that was that bad. It was the inflammation caused by virus that was so bad. And here is an oil that by itself can cause inflammation. So you can imagine how bad it could be. And it can also promote obesity, and it can actually produce resistance to insulin, and therefore lead to development of diabetes as well, which is another lifestyle disease. Finally, the nutritional value of this fat is actually zero. And it is like eating a candle wax or some melted plastic. So it has got as much nutritional value as a melted fat. Now, a bit about dietary cholesterol. Some people think that, okay, these fats are produced inside the body. But what about if we take directly cholesterol? What happens? So now some evidence has come that even if you take dietary cholesterol up to a limit, let us say up to 200 milligram or maximum up to 300 milligram, which is like 2 eggs consumption per day, there is no harmful effect. But if you consume beyond this level, then cholesterol could be harmful. So eating cholesterol up to a limit is not that bad, or is not bad actually. In egg is actually good, because if you take it in limits, then it has got the yellow part has got a lot of essential fatty acids, and the white part has got a lot of proteins. So egg is really a very good food as long as you consume it within limits. Now, coming to this, why do we say that Mufa is good? Actually, Mufa was the one that was used in the study I showed you, which reduced death rate and increased life expectancy. It's an essential component of the Mediterranean diet, which used olive oil as a source of Mufa. And what Mufa does is, I already told you, increases good cholesterol and decreases bad cholesterol. And what is the result? That it leads to low levels of plasma cholesterol and decrease the risk of heart diseases and stroke. And good source of Mufa are olive oil, mustard oil, and groundnut oil. Coming to the second type of fat, that is the PUFA, that is polyunsaturated fatty acid. Now we know that PUFA is good oil, or at least neutral good oil, because it decreases bad cholesterol. Unfortunately, it also decreases good cholesterol and increases triglyceride also. So this is a bit counterintuitive for the PUFA. Therefore, PUFA is not as good as Mufa. But there are two types of PUFA. I already told you. There is N6, which is the linoleic acid, and there is N3, which is the alpha linolenic acid. Now, N3 is a good PUFA, and you have to keep it in mind. So whenever we talk of PUFA, we try to talk about whether it is a good PUFA or the N3 rich PUFA, or neutral PUFA, that is N6 rich PUFA. What does N3 PUFA does? We saw that PUFA can increase, can lower good cholesterol, but N3 PUFA does not have that effect on HDL. Rather, it decreases triglyceride and can decrease risk of sudden cardiac death, arrhythmias, heart attacks, and blood clotting also. On the other hand, the neutral PUFA is N6, which is present in cotton oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil. The rich source of N3 PUFA, that is the good PUFA, is mustard oil, Bengal gram, fenugreek, and fish oils, or fish, as I already told you. Coming to the third type of fat, that is saturated fat. Several studies, and some of them very recent studies, which are the pure study for heart diseases, Malmo study for cancer diseases, and so on, have shown that overall saturated fatty acids can be neutral or slightly protective if taken within a balance. So if you go beyond a limit, then they can cause harm. So as I said, if you consume 2 eggs per day, it's okay. But if you consume more than 2 eggs, then it could be harmful. So guidelines have suggested a restriction of saturated fatty acid. And good source of saturated fats are coconut oil, ghee, butter, and full milk. So these are the good sources of saturated fats. Now coming to the worst kind of fat, which is trans fat. And I told you that trans fat has got a lot of problem. Not only it decreases the good cholesterol and increases the bad cholesterol, but it also affects the triglycerides. It also affects the insulin balance, causing diabetes, and can cause obesity and so on. Actually, on per calorie basis, if you consume trans fat, there is a marked increase in risk of coronary artery disease or heart disease, heart attacks, versus any other nutrient. And even a level beyond 3% of the total intake can be very harmful. So that is why most people have restricted use of trans fat to less than 3%. And actually, Western countries recommend less than 1% of trans fat. And the study shows that if you just increase the use of trans fat by 2%, there is a 23% increase in risk of heart disease and 29% decrease in risk in blood vessels. They start getting clotted, and good cholesterol is lowered by about 20% also. So everything bad about trans fat, nothing good about trans fat. Whereas for other oils, there is something good, something bad. For Mufa, everything is good. For Pufa, something good, bit bad. Saturated fat, something good, a lot of bad if you take large quantities. But for trans fat, everything is bad. Whatever happens with whatever trans fat does is only harm, harm, and harm. So that is why, we thought we will do this campaign, that is ban trans fat, because this is something where you have no justification of using it at all. And actually, Denmark was the first country in 2003 to regulate trans fat on national basis, putting a cap on the amount that any food, any processed food could contain only a limited amount of trans fat and no more than that. In 2006, US started requesting people to put the trans fat content onto the food products. So if you buy any food product from American market, they would be telling you how much trans fat is present. If you look at the fine print, you will find out how much trans fat is present in that particular food. So you cannot sell any food in US without telling the consumers how much trans fat is present in that particular food product. And New York became the first to regulate or to start limiting the trans fat in all its restaurants, from high-end eateries to fast food joints. So this is what has been happening worldwide. Eventually, what happens, a lot of momentum generated in West regarding the use of trans fat, so that McDonald's itself had to come out with trans fat free oil for all its nearly 14,000 restaurants all around the world. And so it started the trans fat campaign to completely free its food products of trans fat. Then in 2007, Starbucks also joined the campaign and eliminated trans fat completely from its foods in 10 stores in the metro areas. Nowadays, trans fats are banned in Denmark, Switzerland, Iceland, Sweden, Austria, New York City, Seattle, and state of California, which means that you cannot use any trans fat. It has to be less than 1% in any food product. If any food contains more than 1% of trans fat, that food cannot be sold in these countries and in these cities. What about India? In India, the FSSAI, which is the regulatory body, initially for 2021 kept the limit as 3%, but in 2022 it has capped it to 2%. Of all the foods that can be sold in India should be less than 2% of trans fat. Now, whether we are following the labeling ideas, and I think you students can play a big role there. because if the label is not correct, then you have to go to the concerned authority, tell them that labeling these people that you should label the amount of trans fat, and try to see that the trans fat should be less than 2% for the food sold in Delhi. Now, where is trans fat found in diet? I will come again. Please just hold on. I think my battery is running low, so I like to connect to the battery. Just hold on for a moment. Okay, so so where are trans fats found in diet? Number one source is reused cooking oil, and I told you, there are a lot of establishments which reuse oil again and again, and so that the unsaturated fats gets partially hydrogenated, and in the dhaba food or ready food you find this kind of happen. All those establishments which use vanaspati ghee or margarine in cooking, like again dhaba and redis, and some even good restaurants may be using vanaspati ghee in their for cooking, and they are a rich source of trans fat. Then processed foods such as meat, chocolate bars, soups, biscuits, any processed food that you are consuming, you have to look at the label, and you have to make sure that the trans fat content is less than 2%. If there is no label talking about trans fat, it is likely that trans fat is high content. So you have to look at these. And then frozen foods, breakfast cereals, anything that is without label, trans fat is likely to be high. Then many bakery products, again, they don't contain label, like cakes, donuts, pastries, etc. They also may have a very high trans fat content, and you need to ask the establishment to put the label, or if they're not doing, then inform the appropriate authorities so that they can take action. Then any takeaway or fast food can have a lot of trans fat. Gujias that you buy, unless there is a label which talks about the amount of trans fat, they can have a lot of trans fat. Samosa, kachori, etc., which don't have any label, are likely to have a lot of trans fat in diet. Now, how do you find how much trans fat is present? Again, the labels are the only informative things, and the labels sometimes hide behind these statements: shortening oil, hydrogenated fat, hydrogenated vegetable oil, partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, etc., which might be mentioned or not mentioned, which are basically trans fat, and they are just using these terms to avoid using the term trans fat. And the trans fat ingredient has been actually declared toxic by the World Health Organization in 2009. So this is something really bad for human health, and it is important to find out the label of trans fat in all the food products that you eat outside. Now, coming to the last part, what about other foods? Now, coming to the other foods, there is a lot of benefits of using fruits and vegetables. The more fruits and vegetables you consume, the risk of heart disease is lower. And you can see on the left, that's the amount of fruits and vegetables. When it reaches a particular threshold, then suddenly the risk of heart disease declines. Likewise, a balanced diet which contains 3 to 4 daily servings of fruits, vegetables, and legumes. What are legumes? Legumes are like chole, dals, etc. These are the leguminous products. So when you consume beans, once you consume these products, these are the legumes. And if you consume a lot of these products, at least 3 to 4 daily servings, you actually, even a normal person can have a lower death risk when you consume these kind of food products. Now, something about raw vegetables. The habit of Indian food is cooking and frying hard any vegetable. And once you do that, actually the vegetable loses its value, and then it does not become a good food. So what one should do is to minimally cook the vegetables or use some of those vegetables which you can even eat raw. Like for example, carrots, you can eat raw, tomatoes, and so many other salads you can eat raw. So therefore, eating salad before meal is a very good idea, because that gets you some raw vegetables. And what this particular slide shows you is that if you consume a lot of raw vegetables, and but be careful, not all raw vegetables. It does not mean you should eat all the vegetables. Only those vegetables that are used in salads are good. Other vegetables you can lightly cook, because some of the vegetables may have some toxins, and so if you eat them raw, you are exposed to certain toxic material. But if you lightly cook them, maybe steam them, maybe lightly boil them, then they the toxins are destroyed and the good thing is preserved. On the other hand, some salads, as I said, carrots, tomatoes, and so on and so forth, which you consume as salads, can be eaten raw because they don't have any toxins, and they are very good to reduce the risk of death. The other thing that are good is fiber. And as I said, the whole grains which contain a lot of fiber. So non-polished rice and brown rice that is available in South India, or fibrous wheat, which is contains a lot of husks and not maida. These is actually, once you use them, you decrease the risk of heart attacks and heart disease. Now, coming to some of the final points, carbohydrate and heart disease. I told you before that carbohydrates are even worse than fats. And it has been found that if you replace saturated fat with carbohydrate, actually you do more harm than good. So even saturated fat is better than carbohydrate. And carbohydrate can cause more harm. As a matter of fact, if the carbohydrate intake is more than 60% of energy intake, and actually this is one of the problems of Indian diet, especially Indian vegetarian diet, that carbohydrate intake is about 70% or more. And that can be even more harmful than saturated fats, because it directly increases the risk of death. And heart disease related and non-heart disease related deaths, both are increased if you consume a lot of carbohydrate. Of course, we know that a lot of consumption of carbohydrate can also cause diabetes, but beyond diabetes, a lot of carbohydrate intake can cause heart diseases as well. Because what happens is, when you consume a lot of carbohydrates, there is a lot of increase in triglyceride and some increase in cholesterol as well. And we know that these are the ones that can cause heart disease. Also, if you consume a lot of carbohydrate, then there is obesity can be caused, or fatness can be caused, and that is another important cause of heart disease, and also decreased life expectancy. So carbohydrate is again something which is mostly harmful and very little good. So coming to last point, the fish and other sources of omega-3 fatty acid. Now, it has been found in many studies that intake of 20 to 40 grams per day of N3 PUFA in the way of, say, fish can half the risk of heart disease, and can also particularly reduce the risk of sudden cardiac death. And likewise, some other studies have also shown the same thing. There is this famous GC study, which shows that if you consume the N3 PUFA, then 14% decrease in risk of heart disease. But suppose you are unable to take fish. Suppose people are vegetarian, they don't take a lot of fish, but they still get capsules of omega-3 fatty acids in these fish oils in capsule, and up to 1 gram per day can be consumed. But natural source is even better. 2 to 5 servings of fish per week, salmon, sardines, shellfish, tuna are good forms of omega-3 fatty acid and N3 PUFA. Now, but somebody might say that, okay, we are totally vegetarian, we can't even take fish oil. So we have to know that there are non-fish oil source of omega-3 fatty acid as well. And there is something called alpha-linoleic acid capsules, or ALA, is also available in the market, which is non-fish source of omega-3 fatty acid, which can be taken. Naturally, it occurs in canola, which is an oil that is found, that is produced in US, but also flaxseed and even soya bean oil. So these are also good source of omega-3 fatty acids. So finally, I have to say that while these artificial sources of omega-3 fatty acids are good, but they are better than nothing, but they are not as good as the natural sources. So if you take flax seeds or soya bean, they are better than consuming capsules of ALA. So I think I will end here. One last slide. A little bit about cooking oil as well. Let me talk about cooking oil because it's a very important thing. Cooking oil can make a difference because they contain a balance, or they contain different fatty acids in different proportions. The ideal cooking oil is one which is low in saturated fatty acids, high in Mufa as expected, high in N3 PUFA, with no trans fat, which is stable at high temperature. You know that, if you heat oil at a certain point, it starts smoking. And if you take butter, smoke point is quite low. If you take butter and you start heating, immediately it will throw a lot of fumes. And so because it has got a low smoke point. But if you take something called rice bran oil or mustard oil, as a matter of fact, rice bran oil is another oil which has got high Mufa content. So rice bran oil can be a good oil like mustard oil or groundnut oil as well. And at the same time, rice bran oil has got a high smoke point. So you can heat it at a very high temperature, because this is an oil used by Chinese for wok frying. So they actually fry at very high temperature with this oil. Without this oil smoking. So this is also an important factor in cooking oil. And finally, people get confused about refined and unrefined oil. Remember the general rule that if unrefined oil is nicely prepared, it is better than refined oil. Always unrefined oil is better than refined oil if it is prepared in a hygienic manner. Now, coming to the point, different compositions of oils, you can see that some of the oils are very rich in Mufa. For example, mustard oil, 70% Mufa, canola, 62% Mufa, then olive oil, 76% Mufa, and so on and so forth. But other oils are not that rich source of Mufa. Rice bran oil is not here, is another about 70% of Mufa. The other good component in the oil is N3 PUFA. And again, you can see that mustard oil and canola are good source of N3 PUFAs as well. So I think I will end here, and I will be happy to answer any questions if you have.
Thank you, sir. Firstly, I would like to inform all those who are watching on YouTube that you could use the YouTube live chat feature to ask the questions. Now I would like to invite Aditya Raj Singh to ask his question.
Thanks a lot, Badri. Good afternoon, sir. I would like to ask you about some of the richest sources of trans fats which are commonly found that we should try to avoid in order to maintain a healthy lifestyle.
So richest source of trans fat are, as I said, anything that is cooked in reused oil. So kachoris, pakoris, and things. If you go to street and you have these street vendors and they are using the oil to cook whole day, they will use the same kadai. They are rich source of trans fat. Other than that, anything that is cooked in vanaspati ghee is also a rich source of trans fat. So many dhabas and many other food establishments, even restaurants, use vanaspati ghee because of the benefits I told you, that it's a very good to keep. It's very easy to keep. And therefore, they use a lot of vanaspati ghee. And so they are the rich source. Then bakery products often use trans fats. And therefore, bakery products are also many a times like pastries and donuts or even cakes could be a good source of trans fats. And anything that is available in market, fried thing, which does not have a label, is likely to have a very high trans fat content. All right.
Thank you for the information, sir. Now I would request Riddhi Deshpal to ask her query regarding the subject.
Thank you. Sir, I would like to ask that are cold pressed oils good for our health? And what is the amount of trans fats present in them?
So, a naturally occurring oil will not have any trans fat. So cold fat pressed oils will not have any trans fat unless they are converted into vanaspati ghee, or unless they are reused again and again. Because once they are reused at high temperature, I told you, hydrogenation starts happening, and then they start getting converted to trans fat. So cold pressed oils will not carry any trans fat, number one. Number two, cold pressed oils generally are not refined oils. And therefore, as I said, any not refined oil, if done nicely, is good for health. So cold pressed oils are good for health.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now I'll hand over the mic to Parth to ask his question.
Thank you, Riddhi. Good evening, sir. I want to ask whether biscuits and other bakery products all bad for our health, or are there some that are good for health?
So you wanted to know which oils are good for health and which are bad for health. That's what you are asking.
No, sir. I wanted to ask whether biscuits and other bakery products all bad, or either, sir, there are some that are good.
So as I said, nowadays there are label. So the packing will contain a label which will let you know the amount of trans fat. So if there is a label and if it talks about trans fat, you will know anything less than 2% or less than 1% is good. But if there is no label in a bakery product, if there is no label, I would suspect that it has got a very high trans fat content. So avoid that kind of product which does not have label.
Thank you, sir. Now I'll hand over the mic to Samrat.
Good evening, sir. Sir, is olive oil good for health?
Yes, olive oil, as I said, has got very high Mufa content, 76%, is good for health. But the only issue is that for Indian kind of cooking, where you have to heat oil at a high temperature, because we do a lot of bhunoing, frying, and even deep frying. So what happens is that olive oil, especially extra virgin olive oil, has got a low smoke point. So as soon as you go beyond a certain temperature, it starts smoking. And once that happens, I told you that the oil starts getting converted into trans fat. So because olive oil has got a low smoke point, you cannot use it for deep frying and heavy frying. You can use it in salads and for low frying, where very little frying is required. Then olive oil can be used. But generally in Indian cooking, we do a lot of deep frying or much of frying, and there olive oil could be actually harmful than beneficial. But if used in salads, etc., it can be very beneficial.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, I see a question in the chat. So they're asking how much amounts of HDL and LDL should be present in our body.
So LDL, actually in a normal person who does not have any disease, LDL value less than 140 is okay. But in somebody who has got heart disease, the LDL value should be less than 100 or less than 80. And if somebody has got repeated heart diseases, then we even try to bring it out to less than 60. So this is just hold on. So this is the value of LDL. Now coming to HDL, a good cholesterol, a value of more than 50 is good. A value of between 40 to 50 is okay. But a value less than 40 is not good. And Indians, especially what we see is that the value gets to less than 40 very often. And that may be because of high carbohydrate consumption, which leads to high triglycerides and low HDL values and low exercise. The way to increase HDL is to exercise. That is the way to increase HDL. The people who exercise a lot will have higher HDL values. Or if they use a proper oil, as I said, if they use a lot of Mufa, then HDL values can be high. It can be more than 50. 40 to 50 is okay, but less than 40 is definitely, actually 45 to 50 is okay, but less than 45 is not good. And Indians often have a value of 35, and that is not good. So good cholesterol is less in Indians actually as a whole race.
So thank you, sir. So moving on, Deepti Mishra asks that if are all dairy products bad, like dahi or milk, is it good?
So basically, dairy product that has lot of fat, uh, because that would be saturated fatty acid. And as I said, within a limit, saturated fatty acid is okay. But if you go beyond a limit, then saturated fatty acid can be harmful. So people who consume lot of whole buttermilk or whole cream milk, then that can be harmful. But a limited quantity of saturated fatty acid can be actually neutral or even helpful because it increases good cholesterol. So broadly, we cannot say that every milk product is bad. It is especially the skimmed milk product, which have less saturated fat, are quite good, and therefore they are promoted. So curd that is made out of skimmed milk or any product that is made out of skimmed milk cannot be bad. Even whole cream milk is okay within a limit. If you cross the limit, then it can have more saturated fatty acid, and then it can get bad.
All right, sir. So due to time constraints, we will be unable to take up any further questions from the audience. Thank you, sir, for your intriguing and informative session about banishing excess trans fat from our lifestyles. It was truly a fruitful and enlightening session for the students, teachers, and even our audience on YouTube. We learned about the relationship between our diet and diseases, and even measures to follow in order to regulate our dietary practices. The session has helped us identify among good fats and bad fats, and also informed us about the adverse effects of trans fats along with the benefits of unsaturated fats. Further, we even got to know about new terms like smoke point of oils and the composition of different oils. I am sure that each and every one of us has something to learn from the session and are driven to eradicate trans fat from our lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.